Hi. I like this shirt.
I like it.
Pretty sick.
Old school, yeah.
So Dave came down from Blue Star this past week. Well, it would be last week when you guys hear this. And he brought a couple shirts.
Yeah.
And they're sick. I was saying to you, I like the skull thing.
So do I.
I don't know why. Skull. When I was a little kid, I used to like that. There used to be a store in the mall called West 49.
Yeah.
And it was like a skateboarder store. So the brands were like Quicksilver and like Billabong and like all these old school skater brands.
Those things still around?
I don't know about those. I think some of those brands are, but that store isn't around.
Oh.
But it's like that skater punk like kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And I used to love going in that store because it had like all the weird like graffiti looking designs and skulls and like all this stuff. And I used to fire me up when I was a kid. I loved going in there just to look at like all the shirts and stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't know why though. Skull shit.
I was probably past that.
Were you?
I was probably wearing plaid.
What would have been the...
No, I think I went to that store.
When you were a kid though, like what was the...
Kid?
Yeah, so just let me fill the background. I'm saying like grade, let's say when I was in grade 4 to like grade 7, 8.
Yeah.
It was like the skater brand stuff was what was cool.
See, when I was that age, there wasn't anything like that.
No, just you wear
jeans. I remember
like,
in grade 7 and 8, everybody up north, we used to wear the jean jacket, the Canadian tuxedo.
Yeah.
Work boots.
Mm-hmm.
That was cool with the tongues out.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah, and lumberjackets.
Oh yeah.
That was the cool thing.
Yeah.
Long hair.
That's fine.
Yeah, I guess that's a thing.
Yeah.
I had it.
It makes sense. It's cool. It's funny how
Winter time.
Yeah, it's cool that the styles transition too now, even like with haircuts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it was like from the skater brand stuff, it went to like the preppy kid thing with the plaid collared shirts, like that kind of crap. And then I don't know what happened in high school. I don't really remember.
That was just bad haircuts.
Everyone has a bad haircut.
Bad haircut.
I don't know why.
I don't know.
See some of the guys in here?
Armac came in yesterday with that one nice and high and tight. Looked great.
Yeah, I know. And then his brother doesn't get a haircut.
Yeah.
Cut your damn hair. And they all have the same hair.
Charlie hasn't had a haircut since.
He's got the mop going.
He went to training camp last year. I get my haircut here. I'm not telling you that because you watch it every few weeks. We get it right in the gym. Yeah. So Charlie, before he went to camp, paid for a nice haircut, and then he went up to camp, and 4 of them went and got their head buzzed. I know. He hasn't had a haircut since, except for the mullet for the playoffs. So his hair is looks like a helmet on him right now.
I know. It's so funny.
Looks good in a helmet.
It does. That's the hockey hair. It looks good in the helmet.
Yeah, he looks like 80s. He looks like Bob Probert right now.
Yeah. He's got pretty thick hair too.
Yeah.
I got that. That's why it gets long. It's hard to manage. But anyways, thanks Dave for the shirts. And then all that Blue Star stuff you guys know. I got it right here over my shoulder. You can check it out. I got the links to all that stuff, the like protein, creatine, pre-workout, etc. So you can check that out. The links are in the bio or in the description of this video. You want to talk about the past week of camps a little bit?
You can start.
Before we get into the episode, because I think it'll kind of dovetail.
Yeah, well, that's a nice word.
May I say?
Yeah.
Dovetail into the topic.
Yeah.
So we had our first week of our junior experience that we normally have in the summertime, but we had it with a young group this year. So we kind of changed the game a little bit, and we're having a little bit more of the younger kids come also to try it out. So we had the 2011 12s, which would be U13, U12, I believe. It always confuses me. But what a great camp, man. What a great camp with these kids. It was nice. It was full for 2. We had 2 full teams in the camp, and we had a bunch of kids come from out of town, which was kind of a nice touch. We had a kid from like Arizona, a couple kids from Michigan, a couple kids came from the Toronto area. And it was a pretty awesome camp. I was surprised to see, because I was doing more of the off-ice stuff, but I was surprised to see how much they actually listened. And when we had our guest speakers in, like had some of the players chat with them, whatever, that they actually have good questions.
Awesome.
And it's funny.
Yeah, I missed that part.
Yeah, because it's funny when they're interested. And most of the questions are like, what's your favorite stick and all this, right? Like some of them are asking good questions, like what was the hardest injury you had to come back from? Or like what was the or how was the jump from this level to that level? Like asking
Those
actual,
are good
I know,
questions.
right? And they're like
Yeah,
12. You know what I
really
mean?
good.
It's
Yeah,
crazy. So it was an awesome camp, man. We had some good, really good players, and it was fun. I had fun. Um, and again, that out of town touch is cool because people found us like from the podcast to come
yeah,
here.
yeah,
And actually, side note to that, we have Norway guy here right now,
yeah.
which is pretty sweet. So
Junior with our
yeah,
junior pros.
yeah, Daniel came over from Norway. He's training here for a month. He plays U20 over there, which is pretty sweet. So it's just cool seeing like the connections that are coming up and participating in the camp. So what did you think about going through that first week, and maybe talk a little bit about that age too, because that's going to kind of go into our age appropriate kind of conversation.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I haven't worked with young guys for a long time. So the first day I just had to readjust because I've been working with guys 18 to or 17 to 20 really for the last few months. So it was like different getting down to basics and stuff. But like, yeah, it was a great camp, and I loved how the kids responded and like to learn for the most part. But the difference between that and the older kids is kind of like we're doing in our podcast today is like there's only so much you can have, and there's only so much you can give, and and there's only so much that they can absorb. So you can very easily go down the rabbit hole of over teaching and forgetting what age they are. But nonetheless, it was very good, and I was really happy with some of the skill level of these kids. Um, and some of the smarts. We had a couple of players that are very, very, very smart little hockey players. Um, so built some really good relationships. That's what I really like because some of the, especially the out of town people. Well, there's some local ones too. Built some good relationships, but the out of town people were really so appreciative because they've only seen what they've seen, right? And they love the camp as the comments were at the end of it. Like they want to come back and. Anyways, it was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah,
I loved it.
I was saying a little side tangent that kind of relates. We were doing the talks, and so what I was doing, because it's cool for the young kids to see some actual players that are kind of where they want to be. So like the first day I had Charlie chat with him a little bit, then the second day I had Adam Jeffrey, third day I had the McPherson twins talk with them, and then on the last day we just had a little powwow about some like training and nutrition type stuff, right? And they're just little kids. So to your point of you can't overteach, you can't over-explain. Um, obviously, you want to be aware of that. But what I thought was interesting was even like seeing the difference in maturity level from those kids up through our junior guys. So I'm sitting there with, you know, the McPhersons who are just turned 18, and these little kids are looking at them like they're men, right? They're grown ups. And meanwhile, I just got the feedback from the Flyers development camp about how Connor and Ryan did in their like fitness testing and whatever. And I think they were the youngest ones that were at the development camp. And they're just like in the mix, like average scores for everything. And they still like we were talked about before. It's like from 18 to 22, how much development you have in those years, right? But anyways, they're giving their talk, and it's funny that my expectation of what an 18-year-old is going to say, or a 17-year-old for Charlie. So I go from Charlie. I'm like, man, am I going to be like pulling teeth trying to get answers? And he did fine. Then Adam comes in, who's 22, and it's like this guy's like a scholar in how he answers questions, right, to these kids. I can say like two things, and he takes it and runs with it and has like a full speech about the topic, whatever. And then I come back to the McPhersons the next day, who are again 18, and seeing them do better than I thought they would, speaking with young kids like that. It's interesting to see. It's like, oh wow, like they're growing up, like they're getting older, like they're becoming adults,
Yeah.
which is weird.
Well, I think when you put them under fire like that, they know that they can help the kids. So
Right.
that I think they think of their answers a little bit more than just you and I talking.
Yeah, for sure.
So they want to make sure that they're giving something of substance, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Which is a good challenge. Like that's good to see them rise to the occasion, right?
And it was cool to see like just the contrast between you got 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, and then you have our 17-year-olds, and even coming into the gym after.
Yeah.
These kids are watching some of the actually we made a point of talking about it a little bit. They're in the gym watching the 2007 kids do their workout after the junior guys were done, and we were talking like you guys could play against these guys.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're 12, you're 13, you could play against the '07 age group, your first year of
You're
junior.
on the fast track.
Yeah, right. So it's like it's actually possible. You're going to be in that gap. So, anyways, it was a good experience for the whole week because we had the older guys here, the younger guys here. The younger guys got to see the older guys. The older guys got to see the younger guys. They were all interacting, and it was a really good first week, and it was interesting to see for you and Dale, coaches on the ice, particularly how, like you said, you had to change gears to bring it down to the age appropriate thing, right? Where it's like you can't coach that session the same way you're coaching the junior guys, and how you guys have the ability to, you especially have the ability to, you've done it so much, you have so much experience with it that your ability to read the group and change the pace to what the group is at is really, really important. It's probably one of the most important skills you can have as a coach. Is, we touched on it last week a little bit, is knowing your audience and um who you're talking to.
Well, that's why, like, one of the things I've always done is I write my program out for the week and for the day in themes, not in drills. Do you know what I mean? So that the theme might be, okay, I want to work on some skating and agility and some, maybe it's stick handling or shooting or whatever. And if I write down drills, then that could go out the window in 2 seconds. So that's why the bank that I have in my head, I can adjust very quickly, because I mean, if I'm doing drills and it's not working, now what? Right. So you got to adjust to the group, and sometimes you go, oh no, we can add, this is good, and sometimes you go, oh, this is way too much. Like just a simple thing coming out. Let's say we're doing a drill like where we're adding some tight space stuff, and it's like, okay, so for an older group, I'm going to teach them how to create more space. So that could be like a weight transfer, a leaning into the hands and all that kind of stuff. Whereas the younger, so it could be an age where where they're not just there yet. So we just have to teach them maybe the very basics of that.
Mm-hmm. And I do the same thing off the ice. I was talking to a Norway guy yesterday, actually. We were coming back from the track, and it was from the hill, and it was our first hill workout. And he was asking, because I shortened parts of the workout. So I kind of do the same thing. I'm like, okay, what's the point of this workout? Like, what's the theme through the workout? And then I adjust on the fly based on how the guys are feeling for the older group, because the younger guys, you can't do that the same way because they don't know their body well enough yet to know how they feel, if that makes sense. So like their subjective opinion of how they feel doesn't mean as much as an older guy, because the older guys are a little bit more serious about it, and they're not just going to tell me they don't feel great because they're being a baby about it. Like they're going to actually say, no, I'm bagged, or no, I'm good, whatever. Right. So I was saying to Daniel, we were talking, and I said, he was asking why he's like, well, we were supposed to do this many and we only did this many. We were supposed to do this many lengths, we only did this many lengths. And I said, yeah, because first of all, it's our first hill day, which I'm always more lenient with the first day of whatever the change is that we've made. And then the second thing is you have to be able to read the group and see how are guys actually feeling. So for example, we did in the workout plan that I had, which is like you're saying, the themes, I wanted to work on some quickness. So we did 5 meter, 10 meter, 15 meter, 20 meter sprints, 6 of each going up the hill. So sounds like a lot, and it is, but the distances are pretty short and we're taking a lot of rest, so it's not crazy. So we finished our 15 meter. So on paper, I had the 20 meter sprints up the hill, right? But as we're going, I can kind of see like the sprints are slowing down a touch. The guys have made like a couple comments about, man, the legs are feeling a little bit juiced now. And we still have 2 other things to do as part of the workout. So if I hammer out another 6 sprints on them, is that going to diminish the benefit of the other part now? And that's the question. These are the questions you have to ask. So as a trainer, it's important that it's not always just stick to the plan, because if the guys aren't feeling it, like honestly not feeling it, not just being babies about it, if they're actually like, you can tell they're bagged, or they could look like they could fall asleep right now if they close their eyes. It's like, today's not the day to push the intensity, because not only will this workout not be very productive, it will affect tomorrow also. So that ability to read the group and adjust I do the same thing you're saying, and I use themes for my workouts. I have an actual plan. I think a little bit more specific than you do because I actually have a workout written out. But on the fly, it's like, okay, that's not working today. We adjust. We adjust. That way, you're always pushing progress, and sometimes progress is pulling back, right? Sometimes progress means pulling back, not just pushing forward through whatever the impasses that you have. Because if you do that, sometimes you just get diminishing returns. But particularly when you're on the ice, back to what you were saying, is you have to be able to see what can they handle and what will they actually respond to. Otherwise, I mean, I know exactly how it feels out there when it's just like, holy Christ, like this is just a mess right now, you know. So it's important. Um, so I want to go into the kind of the age appropriate things. This is the second episode of the coaching series that we're gonna do. Um, so maybe just as a little bit of an overview, I want you to summarize a little bit like what you just said, maybe a little bit more detail about how to coach each age group and kind of how it would evolve from the young to the old. And we're going to keep it so because there's so many things to talk about. We'll keep it. The assumption is we're talking about the AAA level or like the highest level of each age group. Because if we go younger, we could be talking about it forever. So we'll just assume the AAA higher kids that want to progress to higher levels of hockey. Um, so maybe talk about a little bit about that evolution from like the U10 up to, or even younger than U10 up to, junior U20 kind of age.
Yeah. So the evolution of it is basically, like, to keep it really simple, is the younger that you are, the more um, the more less specific you are, I guess we can say.
The more or less.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're looking at a lot of touches, a lot of repetition, a lot of you give some instruction, based on the drill and what am I trying to accomplish? I'm trying to accomplish kids being comfortable with pucks, skating, turning, passing, all that kind of stuff. So let's say we get to the U10, that'd be the first year or two of AAA hockey. It's, I would say, the same thing as far as the skill sets go. Is like you're trying to get them to move well, handle the puck well, be comfortable with the puck, and all that kind of stuff, with a little bit of system, like a little bit, like, because like that's what I was going to say earlier, is as you get younger, you got to be really aware of what their brains can absorb, right? So if you're teaching all the time, like, just think about it, take 10, 20 kids that are 10 years old, the brain is like, can I just do something? And they're fiddling with pucks and stuff like that. You got to read that. So you can get really upset as a coach, right? You can lose your mind, say, hey, you need to listen. And it's like they just can't help themselves. There's a puck there, and they want to play with it, and they just wanted to get the drill done. So it's like the more that you can keep it fast moving, like a little bit of instruction, maybe a good demo, and let them do drills, then that's probably the most benefit to it. So now you have your team, and you're going into practices and stuff like that. Of course, you're going to do some specific um, drills that are going to benefit like a team structure, because they're there to learn hockey as well as, just, it's not just a skill building day. So they got to learn how to play a little bit. So doing some breakouts, neutral zone passing, and moving the puck, like forechecks, a little bit of forechecks and stuff like that. Like, it's more of a concept, right? Like, on a forecheck, it doesn't have to be exactly this. It's like, let's get two guys on the puck hard and one guy high. 2-1-2, very simple. The neutral zone play is not really that specific. It can be, it doesn't need to be, because you teach them how to back check hard and stuff like that. But I think the most important thing that you can get out of coaching the youth is, it's a fine line, because I guess this is the point I wanted to make here when they're young, because I just realized it again this past week, is they are just little kids. And like, a lot of parents are really, really stuck on the development and how, what they're learning. Because when I look at a kid, for example, one of the better ones shoot a puck, it's like they're not shooting it right at all. That's not a proper shot at all. Like, very, very seldom, anyways. You get the odd kid that has, he can sauce a puck, or he can shoot the puck well, brings it in, hides it a little bit, but that's, for whatever reason, he can do that. But for most of them, they're just, winding up for shots. You can tell it's telegraphed for like 5 minutes, and you can see it coming. Passes are telegraphed and stuff like that. But that's okay. So you got to let that go. You have to actually realize the young kids, they are young kids, and you can't get too frustrated with it. I think the other thing with teaching the young kids is really, really important is that you build some type of relationship and some kind of trust, that you care about them. So a little thing like pulling kids aside and teaching them, and it doesn't even have to be much, but like a simple thing. Like I told one of my kids this week that I went up to him on the third day, talked to him obviously throughout the week, but on the third day, it was like a biggest compliment I could give him, even though he doesn't know how big it is. But I said, you remind me of a player that I trained, and I said his name is Brendan Warren. He was a great player. He used to train with me all the time from the States, and he played on the U.S. national team, and got drafted to Arizona, and went to Michigan for scholarship at Michigan and all that. He goes, "Oh yeah, really?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to try to see if he can send him a note." But he went away with, "Oh, the message was you're a good hockey player. You remind me of someone that was very successful," and it pushed his buttons, right? Um, so I think at the youngest levels, if you can just have the relationship and just build them up, and not get too hung up on all the technique, because that is going to come over time. And again, as we get older, puberty, are you into hockey actually? Or as it gets more serious, can you continue to play? So, anyways, from U10, it's skill development. It's a lot of it, a lot of touches, and because you go in a tournament, you're going to play a team that's from a big city or whatever, and it's just going to be a skill thing, anyways. It's like who's the fastest, who's they got more better players, so it's like just try to compete with them, right? Um, Teach them a little thing like in practices and stuff. You can give them little coaching cues on how they can do something better, but it's mostly about skill development.
Yeah. Sticking on the young guys before we get to the older ones, I I think it's important. We've made a couple of these examples we've used before because we've talked about the age appropriate thing quite a bit. It's the example that you gave that I liked in one of our past episodes was talking about how if you told an adult to do the RFE squat, right, rear foot elevated split squat, and they've never done it, and you keep trying to teach them, like they're just trying to figure out how to stand on one foot. They're not even worried about executing the move properly. Like they're just trying to stand on their one foot, right? So if you're trying to teach young kids how to stick handle, it's like they're just trying to make sure that the puck doesn't roll off their blade. So that means that they're going to skate with their head down. They're not going to have smooth hands back and forth. They might be smacking it back and forth. They're not going to do anything right, and kids that do pick it up or do listen and get it a little bit, then that's like that's bonus. Like those are kids that are few and far between at that age, you know? So I think to your point about, parents getting really hung up on development, whatever that means for that age. It's like we'll catch heat all the time, or I'll catch heat all the time from parents where they're just like, "Well, they're like, why aren't they stopping them more and correcting more?" And it's like, have you ever tried to do that with your kid? You can't do it. You can't do it. That doesn't mean you never give them a teaching point, obviously, but to a a large extent, they need to just run the routes. Like just do the drill, just hold the puck, just so I can say, here's what it should look like, and do it with my inside outside toe drag 360 spin. Like they're not going to do it right, and you shouldn't expect them to be doing it right, and it shouldn't be measured as a failure if they don't do it right, because that's actually just where they're at. So that's really important to remember with those young kids. And then as a coach, this is where you don't really need to know a whole lot about hockey to be effective with this age group, because it's not about mastering the real intricate details of a skill. It's just about showing the route and letting them run the route. So if you can just skate and basically stick handle, if Joe Dad that played a little bit of hockey is next to you on the ice and you're doing the stick handling drill and they're doing the stick handling drill, it's the same to the 10-year-old or the 9-year-old or the 8-year-old. It's the same, because you run through it and you execute it perfectly. The dad runs through it and executes it at maybe 50% of what you're executing it at. But to the kid, it's like, okay, he goes through the cones and he stick handles. That's what they think, right? So when you're in that position as a coach, you don't have to be the most effective skill teacher there is. And the parent should be aware of that. Like if you have any common sense, like that should make sense to you as a parent or the one watching, you know? And then when it comes to the system stuff, it's like we're not even there yet. We're not even there yet. It's just like basic structures that you pointed out.
Well,
That you're
what
gonna teach
was
later.
a kid thinking? Like, I was just watching the games there, and these are good hockey players. These are actually really good hockey players, and we're watching in the games, and it's like if there's a 3-on-1 that the puck should move, and the kid thinks that he can score a goal,
Right?
he's trying to score,
Yeah.
or
Well,
he's shooting, right?
you know, the other thing too, like just another thing I want to just point out is we were talking with one of the parents at the end of the camp about the brick tournament, right? And some of these, or not even just that one, just some of these big like young kids spring hockey tournaments, and I'm trying to explain to some of the parents that the way that kids at that age play hockey is not the way hockey is played. And it's hard to understand that when they're young. But if you get a defenseman that can just rush the puck through the whole team and score, and he leads the tournament in points, he's got 30 points in 10 games or whatever. It's like that's great that they did well. Like I'm not trying to say that's not good. Like that's great. But if we keep it in perspective, it's like that is not how the game is played. So if he's just faster or can just shoot better or is bigger and can just fight his way to the net, or maybe the goalie is 5'1" and can't reach or whatever, it's like this is not real hockey. So it's cool to have a good experience. It's cool to be excited that your kid is showing some skill or whatever. But you have to be able to keep in mind that at that age, you being one of the elite, whatever that means, doesn't mean a whole lot, right? It's nice and it's exciting and it's fun and all of those things can be true.
It means there's a good base there.
Yeah,
that's what it means,
right? But just let's relax. You know, let the kid get a little bit older. You know, we have one kid, that phenomenal player that these guys were talking about, and I look at the parents, and the parents are like both really small. You know, so okay, that's gonna turn out to be a factor later on. You know, it could. Now it doesn't mean it won't, and it doesn't mean the kid won't be a stud. Maybe he will be, but it's not like a shoe-in because they're 10 and really good that they're gonna grow up and be unbelievable. You know, because they could hit that puberty age and it just flattens out for them.
Which you see,
you know? A ton,
very, very
a ton.
often.
So my point bringing up like this kind of the brick tournament thing in particular, it's like they have like the list of all these kids that are like the top scorers, and like this kid broke a record for how many points they got, and it's like that's fine, like all that's fine, but it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything, you know, because you got a bunch of like stud hockey players that now play in the NHL that went to that tournament, and then you have more that didn't, and
exactly.
they're studs in the NHL or whatever.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So it's important to keep that perspective, particularly at that age. It's a tricky age for a lot of people because they start to get excited early, but that covers kind of like let's call it U10. You touched on a little bit about the skill development stuff, and keeping things fun for the most part is kind of the theme.
Well, it is. It's got to be fun.
Yeah,
it's got to be fun. I'm not saying all fun and it's no seriousness, because this is a great chance to teach kids. Like the base of coaching is like, it's really important that you let them have fun, but it's also important that you teach them a little bit of hockey, some principles of hockey, but it's also important to learn, you know, to have the coaching cues of hard work and what hard work is, and all those cues that as they get moving forward, that they've heard that since they're 8 or 9 years old, right? You got to work hard. There's always someone that could be better. You could be better, like whatever, but it's like teaching the concept of even long term, right? Like in your practices, like when someone struggles at something and then all of a sudden they start getting it, it's like rewarding them, not you're not buying them anything, but like, you know what I mean, like, but rewarding them, saying that's see what happens when you put your time in,
right?
You know, it's those little things that you can do from a young age where it's just because it's not, most of it doesn't stick, some of it does. So it's the volume of reps, but it's also the volume of what they hear from the coach.
Yeah,
right.
The good cues.
Yeah.
So if we call that the U10, I'm actually going to put that with the U11s too. Like U10, U11. I think that's kind of the same. After, honestly, I was after this week that it kind of changed how I group the what's kind of the same. So if we go to like the U12, U13, which would be the kids we had this past week, it's a lot of the same as what you just said. Like it's that same kind of focus, but maybe now we take a little bit of a step up in terms of the hockey part because they can handle a little bit more. So maybe go on that for a
Yeah.
little bit.
Well, okay. So what's the focus like in practices? Like, I think now it's important that there is some structure, because if you're just running and gunning all the time, then the kids are not actually learning hockey. So, you should have an idea of how to play a defensive zone, right? And teach the importance of it, even though most kids at that age aren't going to get it, right? But that's where you reward them for doing good jobs in the defensive zone. But so it's nothing crazy, man, because they're still developing their skills and stuff. But you're looking at defensive zone, and you can tweak a little bit of stuff there. Offensive zone, you have a little bit of one power play or two power plays, like kind of set power plays, right, where they can start thinking the game, stuff like that. The forechecks, all those different things. It's important to do that. So in practices, you could you still want to have like a heavy base of skill, but that doesn't mean it's all pylons, right? So skill could just be skill practices could be like one of the drills I do a lot of the times is a lot of neutral zone passing, like blue line series, and then you incorporate like this is how it works in a game. A lot of D center wings, and then stuff like that where they're moving the puck really well. Learning that the puck has to move forward, right? You can teach them how to enter properly so that when they are entering the offensive zone, they're not entering at the wall all the time. When you're teaching that someone's going to the net, so let's say it's a middle lane drive or whatever, and some guy coming in high, like teaching that kind of stuff, very important. You could get D kind of activating in the rush and stuff like that. It's important, so you can do that kind of stuff. But it's still skill development for the most part.
Yeah, sorry, can I interrupt you
Yeah.
for just a sec? Because one thing I noticed, just because it's fresh in my mind from having these kids from last week, they ask why about a lot of stuff.
They always ask why.
So I think this is
without asking. Like, I'm going to interrupt you for a
Yeah.
second. A lot of them are really shy, though.
Yes.
So they're afraid to ask why sometimes. So they'll sit there and they look around, and that's when you got to recognize that and say, okay, do you understand what I'm saying? And you might have to spend 3 seconds with the kid.
Right. Actually, that's a good point too, because that was something I made a point of saying at the start, like before they went out for their first ice with you. I go in the room like at the start of the camp and just like talk with everybody and make sure everyone kind of knows what's going on. And you can tell like kids, they don't know each other yet. Everyone's a little nervous, and I always make it a point to just say, like, hey, like Andy and like joke around with them a little bit. Andy and Dale look like they're way older than you guys, and they might be a little bit scary to look at, but they're good guys. You can ask them questions. Don't be nervous, like whatever, to try to loosen them up a little bit, get a laugh, get a smile out of the kid, so they feel a little more comfortable to ask the question. But the one thing I notice is that they do ask why we're doing what we're doing or whatever, right? Or can I do this instead of this? And those kinds of questions start to happen around this age. And this is where I find a common question I get from parents this age and older is about like the hockey IQ thing. And the reason I want to put this in now is because you were talking about skill development isn't just cones all the time. And I think as a coach, this is where it's important that you know a little bit of hockey and you know a little bit of the decision making process, because this is where kids can either start to learn it or they don't at all. And I say that from experience because when I was a kid, like we didn't learn I didn't know what a D to D pass was. Like no one had ever say like go D to D. No one said that to me until I was like 14, you know? So it's like, okay, I'm 14 years old playing AAA. We're getting smacked every game by every team. And it makes sense why. It's like none of us know how to play hockey. So we go and play against the better teams, the Londons, the Toronto teams, whatever. And they already have like they got systems. They got not I don't want to say just systems because that's not it, but they know where to go. They know where to be. They know these kinds of things, you know?
So that's a good point. So I can elaborate on that
Yeah.
a little bit. So you hear the term D to D. Okay, so there's a skill. Okay, this is a skill that we can work on in practice where a kid can learn their position better and be a better hockey player. So let's just say we're doing a D to D drill, and you see that the D has the puck. Okay, so I'm going to make they're here, right? So this spaced apart, and let's say this guy has the puck, and he starts shifting more towards his own boards, and they're getting farther and farther apart, and he makes that pass. Well, there's a lesson right there. There's a huge lesson right there. So that's a teaching point, and it's very simple. But the farther that they are away, they're leaving the middle of the ice way open. So this guy with the puck now is, if you think about it, he's moving away from his target. He's moving away, and then this guy's moving away from the target. So now you're making what could have been maybe a 20 or 30 foot pass. Now it's maybe 50. So in a 50-foot pass and you're moving away, you're losing momentum on the pass. So the pass isn't going to be as hard, probably not going to be as accurate. If there's a bobble or there's pressure coming from the middle, if you bobble it or you just don't get it there hard enough, now you expose the middle of the ice. So now everyone's got to work hard if there's a bobble or just to make the play. Um, really hard, and it could be in the back of your net. So now just a simple thing like teaching, you guys are like, people have heard this term, you're on a rope basically. So basically if this guy goes left, your partner kind of goes with him so that you're supporting the middle of the ice.
Move
So
as like a unit.
yeah, so now D, move your feet, great, you get the puck on your stick. And when they're young at 11, they're probably going to stick handle and look down and all that kind of stuff, and that's okay, but you're going to teach them, try to less stick handling, try to keep your head up. This guy reads it, so he starts moving so the guy with the puck starts moving a little bit to the middle of the ice, so that if he does bobble, he's got momentum to go to the middle. This guy can start moving wide, so you're supporting the middle of the ice now. So that's a little lesson right there. That's skill, right? It's not a pylon, but it's skill, right? It could be the forechecker, right? Like I use this example all the time when I learned how to cut off the ice a little bit. It's like if you're aware as a coach, if a guy's going straight on a guy from the outside, like a forechecker to a D to the outside, you're giving the guy, 80 feet of ice to work with, as opposed to cutting him off, like teaching those kind of things. So those are skills, and what those skills do makes hockey easier. And or outsmart them, right? So that's what I'm talking about with skills.
So as a coach, you could say, "Okay, boys, we have to go pass D to D." Okay, that's one thing. But if you stop there, this is where now as a coach, to me, you're falling short. Because if you say to them, "Yeah, pass it D to D," but you're not teaching them how to do it, like you're saying, with that movement part of it. And you see this in hockey all the time, how D's naturally do that hinge, right? Because they're doing exactly what you're saying. They're moving as a unit, they move together. So if you're not pointing those things out, kids at that age can absorb that. Like they can learn that. It's not too much for them anymore. They're old enough where that can make sense. It's like when you move the puck, you have to be moving into your pass. Because that's one of the most common things I see, even with older kids than that. It's like we'll do a D to D drill, and it's like they're either standing still or they're fading out, and now the whole middle of the ice is wide open. Like both D are outside the dots trying to make a D to D pass. And the odd time in a game that might happen just because of circumstance, but for the most part, that is not an optimal position for you to be in. And that's a simple thing to know as a coach. That's not something that this is what I'm saying. You need a little bit of hockey knowledge now, because it's not just about going through cones anymore and getting reps. Now it's teach a little bit of hockey, where you should be, and that's where the hockey IQ thing comes in.
Yeah. And so like a drill that actually helps with that a lot for anybody is just doing a floating box. Because as you're moving around the zone, you're supporting a puck, right? And your feet are moving. So you can do that, and it looks like a simple drill. It's a great drill. It's a bagger. There's so many good things about it. And you can do teaching over that. It's like move your feet, keep your head up, don't stick handle so much, support the pucks, and zip it harder, all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden that is just a natural movement in a game, especially when you take that and you apply it to the game. It's like, okay, I know how to do this. So without going into all kinds of details, you explain, okay, now you're supporting pucks. Now if there's a fumble, you're in a good position, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, that's good shit. That's good shit.
Yeah, and this is why it's really important. We always talk about the importance of asking questions. So now if I'm a coach and I say, okay, people might have just heard you say floating box and they're like, what is that drill? I don't know what that is. And they go look up the floating box drill. It's like, okay, so now if you're going to take that drill and you're going to use that in your practice, don't just take the drill and use it in your practice. Like figure out like where is the hockey that I can teach in this drill. That's what we're talking about, because this is what kids won't grasp if they're not told. And we have this discussion all the time of whether you can teach hockey IQ or it's something that you're born with or whatever. And it's a little bit of both, where like some kids just naturally get it and other kids don't. But a lot of it is a teachable thing. Like you can teach kids where to go and where to be. Some kids will get it better than others, but to a degree you can improve that. So if you take this floating box drill and you just do this drill and you don't explain these things, moving your feet, following your pass, calling for pucks, like these little hockey things that actually are how the game is played, then now you're just doing a drill. And it doesn't take a lot as the coach to do that. You're going to be looking up drills anyways to run your practice. Just ask why. Like, what about this is hockey as opposed to just running a drill?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that, because just with our U18s the other day, we're doing a very simple drill, a neutral zone passing drill and stuff, and passes were off big time, or I would say big time, or offside and stuff. And it's like, Me and Dale stopped them and said, okay, guys, like when you do a drill, it has to resemble hockey. So what this is the reason that the drills are off is it's just a timing issue. You're in such a rush to do the drill because the drill says go to A to B to C to D. It's like you're in such a rush, but you're not putting yourself in a situation where it works, where you can execute it. So it's like it's about timing. Like if you're way ahead of the play, slow it down, go deeper, whatever, get a different angle. That's one. And then the guy passing the puck, it's like if you see that you have to rush it or um, you have lots of time. In either case, move your feet a little bit to shorten gaps in the passing and changing angles. It's like it works both ways. It's like everything that you do, every drill that you do, not every drill you do, but in many drills that you do, there's a teaching point that should resemble hockey. And like just a simple thing like that, like it's just timing. So just because you're ahead of a guy, like if you're going on a 2-on-1 or you're coming out of your zone and there's a guy way ahead of you, it doesn't mean that you have to rush to the far end. It's like there's still timing to it, right? So you might have to slash or slow it down and then speed up or whatever. But it's like doing those, like being aware of it, right?
Right. I wanted to talk a little bit about the puberty thing too, but I want to maybe puberty specifically. I think I want to save to the next group, the U14, U15. But I do want to touch on a little bit what I was saying earlier about like the early bloomers and like kind of not being fooled by kids that are good early. And this isn't necessarily a lesson for it is a lesson for the coaches, but a little bit for parents too. Um, what I was mentioning before is how it's if kids that develop sooner are better skaters or have a better shot or are bigger, they have an advantage in the game, and it's easy to think that um, that means this player is going to be like a stud top player or whatever. And I think as a coach, because I do want to twist it more into a lesson for coaches. I think a lot of coaches, when you start to talk about like winning games and versus it's not just fun anymore, it's like we actually want to win. I think a lot of times coaches they'll lean on that player a lot of the time because they know like that guy can just go score or that guy can make a play that to get us a goal, whatever. So I'm going to heavily lean on that kid and just let them go do their thing so that we can win, even if it's not necessarily playing the game properly or in the best interest of the rest of the players for that age group. So maybe talk a little bit about your thoughts on that. If you have a kid on your team that is just much better, and then how you would coach in this structure at this age when you got a kid that's maybe a bit of an early bloomer, let's say, where they're a little bit better than other kids.
Yeah, well, I think in games, like it's going to depend on your philosophy, right? So if your philosophy is everybody plays and it doesn't matter about the score, then it doesn't matter who's on the ice. Then that's your philosophy. But if your philosophy is I want to develop, but I would like to win some games, then you pick some times out where I need a goal or I need someone to be good defensively or whatever. I need that better player out there. So it's like it's a judgment call on your part. It's like what do you want out of your team? That comes back to your philosophy, right? So like there's no right answer. Um, it's the philosophy that you choose to go with. So I I mean that's what comes down to that. What's fair and what's equal, right? So I'm not a like I'm more of a like if we're gonna play hockey, I'm more of a fair, and I got to say this the right way. Fair meaning there's times in the game where someone will get more ice time, will get special treatment, or will get a little bit longer leash, or will get um, important minutes over someone that doesn't. And that doesn't always mean because they're the better player. It could mean because this guy's just going today, right? So I think that's fair because like if you just roll lines all the time at all costs, especially at the AAA level, which is understood that people are paying to develop. I think most people would like to win a little bit. I think there's times where no, I don't think so. There are times where some guys need to get on the ice if you want to win games. So I think that's actually very important.
And it's not unfair.
It's not unfair.
It's unequal.
It's unequal.
It's
yeah.
not unfair.
That's right.
We make that distinction a lot. It's important to remind people of that difference, right?
Yeah.
Fair and equal are not the same.
It's not the same.
You know?
So I use it. An example is, if someone is a really good player and they're dogging it and they're just not having a good game, and someone, you got a guy that's maybe your third line guy that's just playing really well, and he shows like he's cared. Maybe that's the time to feed this guy a bone. But then it might be a tournament. You just know this guy could probably get you a goal, and you want to win a tournament. Like it really is a judgment call, and to me, it's your philosophy, and your philosophy is your philosophy. So if you're a guy that rolls lines at no matter what, you're gonna have a lot of parents that are pissed, a lot, especially at the expense of your better players. And that's where you'll see people say the guy doesn't know how to coach and I'm leaving, and I'm fine with that. Like I get it. Because I didn't enjoy that when it was just like at a certain level. Once we got to this level, like in Adam and stuff, or what do you call it, U10, it was like I could deal with it a little bit. But once you get to like maybe Pee Wee, or what do you call it, U13, U12, it's like, okay, it's kind of understood that we want to win a little bit here, and you're going to use your best players, right? So and there's lessons in that, right? So that's my philosophy on it. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think it can be frustrating because I remember my parents as well, just like you were saying, getting frustrated with maybe that kid that doesn't play the right way, but can just get you a goal, and the coach keeps giving that kid, and I think that's a really common thing. And sorry, go.
Yeah, no. I was just thinking that the other side of it is that I've said this so many times before, is like it's easy for a parent to look at a coach and say, well, you're making the wrong decision. It's like,
Right.
but if you've never coached, or you're not
Yeah.
in charge of coaching, or you've never played, it's like who are you to judge? But it's like maybe there's a different decision, like based on some knowledge.
Right. Well,
Right.
One example I have when I played in junior, and this guy was one of my best friends, so like I'm gonna give him a little jab here, but whatever. In junior, he was one of these guys where he didn't play hard. He didn't play hard. That was just how he was. And he was drafted pretty high, but he just didn't have any jam to him at all. But he was so skilled that he could just score. He could just get points. And I remember it's a really common thing that people will say is like, well, if this kid had the same opportunity as that kid, they would get the points. And it's most of the time that's just not true. And the reason coaches will continue to go back to that, particularly, I mean, I'm talking about the junior level, so it's maybe not as applicable to the younger AAAs, but the philosophy from the coach is like, if we want to win, statistically, my best chance is to give this guy the ice. And I remember with this one kid that was in junior, my coach didn't even like this kid. Like it was known. Like he was not one of his favorite guys at all, but he could just get you the goal when you needed it. So one example I remember vividly was we were down. I think it was a playoff game or something. We were down 2 goals, and we got like a extended 5-on-3. It ended up being like a 5-minute 5-on-3 power play, and the guy stayed on the entire 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And
it makes everyone happy.
Oh yeah, and so on the bench, like everyone's losing it. And I remember like after the game, like parents talking about it, like he was on the ice the whole time. He didn't get off for 1 second, and my coach didn't even try to take him off.
Yeah.
He would like come to the bench to get a squirt when there was a whistle, and then he would just like shoot him back out. Right? Maybe he came off for like 10 seconds and then went back out. So, anyways, and I remember being frustrated by that on the bench. I'm just like, man, like I have not touched the ice in 5 minutes. I can score on a power play, man. I played on the power play. And I'm like, why am I not on the going? Like we're going unit 1 for 5 minutes of 5-on-3. So it was in my first year. And it wasn't until, years later when I look back on that. And it's like, it's just one of those things that it can frustrate the hell out of you. But on paper, this is your best chance. And that is just the reality of the situation. You can think you're as good as the guy that doesn't play hard. You can think that you would get the points. Or another thing is if a kid gets on a hot streak, right? Let's say a kid that normally doesn't score, he scored like 3 goals in 3 games. And then the parents are like, well, why aren't they giving him a chance on the power play? It's like, because he's not a power play guy. He's not a guy that is going to consistently deliver on the power play. And then they say, well, if you would give him a chance, maybe he would. It's like, yeah, but he's been given chances in other ways and has demonstrated that he's not at the same level as this guy. So even though this power play has failed in your eyes for the last 5 games, remember we've talked about power play stuff before. Like a 20+% power play is good. that means you're not scoring the vast majority of the time you're not scoring, but these guys are going to keep going on that unit because that's my best chance. And I know that these are my best offensive players.
Well, and then you get to the junior level and they've done the reps and they've done the practice and know exactly how that's supposed to go. And you can throw a kid out there and you might bury it first time. And you say, yeah, look, it works, but you do that 20 times and we'll see. I like at the junior level, you can look at that and you go like, what is the coach doing, man? Like this isn't working. But in the NHL and stuff like that, it's like it's you can sit there and say the coach is an idiot, but actually he isn't.
Right. So if we scale it back down to that, whatever we're at here, U13, these are the things that will start to be happening around those ages. And I think as the coach, like you're saying, it's kind of a philosophy thing. Do you choose to keep feeding this kid, or do you choose to, switch off and more of the roll the line style play? And as parents, it's like it can go either way. Like if you don't agree with the philosophy, it's going to be really frustrating for sure.
Yeah, but and it goes the other way, right? If you play everybody fair, you're going to piss off some people. Then if you start feeding the guy ice, then the kids that are on the third line or whatever are going to be those parents, and that kid is like, they're all butthurt. And I understand they want to get on the ice, but it's a philosophy, and you're never going to win either way. The coach doesn't win either way. You're going to have a couple enemies no matter which way you go.
I think the only thing I'll maybe highlight for the coach is if you do have that kid that's just way better, but he doesn't play the game properly, it is still important that you're not just let that kid freewheel all the time because that he'll win you some games or he'll get you some goals or whatever. Like it is important that you're coaching that kid to try to fix those problems, because I've seen that with especially teams around here where it's like we're not a huge center, and sometimes you'll get a kid that's just better, and coaches that don't necessarily know what they're doing, they'll just lean on that kid and they don't coach the kid. It's just like because they just care about winning. Like their philosophy is about winning rather than like developing the kids and coaching. So they'll just let that kid freewheel, which I don't think that's a good thing either.
Well, that's what I was saying earlier about, you have to get in their ear early about things. So the kid, because hey, listen, a lot of the kids that are the best players, they hear from their parents because the parents maybe don't understand how hockey actually works and they think they got a star. So it's like you get a goal or 2 goals and you had a good game. So the coach, on the other hand, could be sitting there. If he's doing a good job, he can be pointing out those deficiencies of your effort here is not good. You have to play the right way. And with the caveat too, like if you want to be a hockey player, like these are the couple things that you have to do, and you continue on it. And a lot of those kids will just be, yeah, I got goals, right? Yeah. But you've done your job, because if they are good, because I've seen that too, guys that just, you actually start disliking them as players because it's just like they think they're better and they're smarter. And then and sometimes it just works out because what they did, they built this confidence or whatever to do whatever they want to do, but they get to junior and then they get straightened out and they're okay, they get it. But the point I'm making is that if you don't get in their ear a little bit about it, or if they don't hear that 1,000 times and they keep shrugging you off, eventually at some level, if they're good, they're going to hear it and they're going to not get ice time, and then they're going to either get it or they don't. So like as a coach, you've done your job saying, when you get to junior or pro or whatever level that is, college, and the coach says, no, you have to be coming back to your own end hard, and you're not going to play until you've learned defense. Like if you get drafted to the London Knights, if you don't, you can score goals, but if you're not defensively sound, you're not playing. You might be in junior B, and you learn that lesson quick, right? So it's like you go, oh yeah, that's that Eric told me that for 50 or 500 times. I guess maybe I heard that before. Yeah, maybe right. He's heard it. You've done your job, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And maybe they don't recognize that, but you've done your job, right? So the other thing I wanted to say though about that age group, just going back to practices, and I would say even for the younger ages, you always want to get battle drills or competition drills in there, because the battle drills is, a lot of the times you can do skill drills and all that kind of stuff, but it's like in the battle drills is where you're going to see the compete. And it's a very important skill, and you want to bring that out to kids. So battle drill. So you're doing a little bit of system stuff, a lot of skill stuff, a lot of teaching at that age, like corrections or the whys of things, but also incorporate a lot of battle drills. Like it's very, very important. Battle drills are like, to me, I think sometimes a lot of people underestimate how good they are, right? and they're fun, but they're it looks like it can almost look like a lazy way to coach. Oh, we'll just throw these guys in, a half ice or do something from the dots down or from the top of the circles down. It doesn't look like it's necessarily much. It looks like it's just a scrambly thing, but there's a lot of teaching that you can do in there, right? By get the shot off, if guys cutting in on, take their hands away and create space and use the back of the net, all those different things. So,
yeah, actually, we had a guy, he's a U16, I think. No, he'd be he U16 last year. Anyways, that you guys had ice time with them Thursday, I think Thursday, this past week, and he was saying, hey, he goes, hey Eric, I thought those skates were gonna be like just skill stuff, and I said, well, I mean, define skill is what I said to him. What do you mean skill stuff? He's like just like cones and like individual like skill things. And I was like, yeah, it's gonna be that, but like skill is also the battle drill stuff. And he's like, I know, like I loved it. He's like, I wasn't expecting we'd be doing these game things too, and that's like just textbook Andy training systems. Like we do the individual skill stuff, and then let's go put it in a small area kind of game and practice it. And it's such an effective way to coach too, because now it's like actual hockey a little bit, right?
Yeah. So like, okay, so let's just say that day was whatever the drill we were doing, but now or whatever skills we were working on, that's fine. But like, how do you incorporate it? So that's what I love about it is the battle drills is you incorporate what you've learned, right? Oh, this works. Like if we've been doing a lot of like you could do a lot of stuff that looks, oh, good drill. Like, I do a lot of stuff like down low in corners and tight space and stuff, and that's fine when there's no pressure.
I was just going to say that exact term. No
but
pressure.
Now you throw someone that wants the puck. Now you got to apply it.
Mm-hmm.
So, that works. No, it doesn't. Or, here's how I can fix it. Or the coach helps you with that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I always relate that to now because when I go train, it's the same thing. Like you practice drills and then you apply it in the live roll after. And it's one thing to do it slow motion or at half speed or at full speed, but with no pressure. But it's like now you have to go apply it in real life when you have pressure. And it's like, oh, this skill isn't that automatic for me yet. And in the time it takes you to think about executing the skill, you can't execute it now. So now it's like, okay, like I need to drill that way more to make sure that it's auto, so that as soon as I see that it's open, I hit it right away. And it's really important that you can do that, and that's why applying it, like you're talking about, is huge. So if we step up to the, let's say U14, 15, I think it's the same. We don't have to revisit I think the only thing I'll say about the focus of practice skill development stuff is just everything kind of levels up a little bit. So the systems, it's a little bit more structured than it was the previous years. We're still doing all of the things that you just talked about. It still all applies here. So I just want to focus a little bit more on just the differences from the previous level. So big one obviously is this when body checking starts happening, right? I think what is it, U13 or U14 starts? I think it's U14. Bantam Minor.
Bantam Minor. So I think U14. The kids are 13 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the 13-year-old year.
Yeah.
13, 14, 15, 16 that's hitting. Yeah.
So body checking is a big one. You can take these in whatever order you want. So body checking is the big one. Then we start getting the distractions of you're a teenager now. So that's going to high school. Everyone starts to get like the I'm a beauty hockey player vibe, those kinds of things. A little bit more of the stuff away from the rink starts to be important, like a little bit of training or a little bit of learning about the lifestyle of being a hockey player that starts to come into it. And then maybe a little bit about roles, understanding what kind of player you are. That probably starts to happen a little bit around that age. And then tied in with all that is this is kind of puberty central now, these ages, 14 and U14, 15. So you can take those in whatever order you want. Maybe you can start with the how body checking and puberty, those two things. That's
exactly where I was going to go, because they kind of tie into each other. Yeah, like this is a real interesting year. It could happen the year or two before, but this is actually where it really happens, where you'll get a kid who grows like he's a big boy now. Like he could be hitting the 6 foot mark. Maybe some guys even taller. You have some other kid that still look like little babies. And I'll use an example. Like I don't like to do this too often, but like I'm going to use Easton Cowan, right? So Charlie used to play against him. Like those guys are the same age. And when he was young, I always said, this kid's got some smarts. He's a good player, makes plays. Like I said that, like when he was in Pee Wee. I'm like,
where did he play minor hockey?
Elgin,
yeah.
Yeah. I said, what a nice player. Like he could make, and he was always smaller. And he was a great player to watch. He just made good plays and he worked hard and all that stuff. There was no hitting. And then the minor Bantam year happened when there was hitting, and honestly, like if he ever listens to this, it's not a carve. It's just a natural thing. He's a first round pick in the NHL, but the minor Bantam year came, and obviously that team was really good, the Elgin team, and then all of a sudden, the Windsor team was beating them quite well most of the time and outplaying them, and it was like, what the hell happened? Well, puberty happened, or body checking happened. There's a different type of player, and Easton at that time was less, very, very, very less noticeable. He was tiny, so that's not his fault that he just doesn't have the testosterone yet. So did he compete hard? Yeah, probably. I don't even know. Maybe he was scared. I don't know. But he wasn't the same player. And then he got to junior and he's a good player, like whatever. But the body checking, so you take a kid that is 12, 13 years old, or yeah, 13 years old, and he hasn't hit puberty yet, and he's playing against a guy that has had hit puberty for the last 2 years. Like that's a difference. Like you're the same age, but you're 2, 3 years apart physically. And that's a big, big difference, especially when there's body contact. So now you got a kid that's 13. He's got a mustache or can grow a beard, which you see, and he's 6 inches taller and he's heavier. And you're going into corners with him or open ice hits, and it's like there's a big difference. So kids could get scared. And then on the flip side, that big guy or the kid that hit puberty early can dominate a game, and he's really maybe not even that good of a player. Like in 2 years, he might be the worst guy on the team. It happens all the time, but there's this false perception that this guy is a great player, and it's just he's just physically older. That's basically the bottom line. So the body checking piece is like you know there's so this is where from a skill development standpoint, if you go back and right back up to U8, U7, U10, and all that stuff. That's why it's very, very important. Like it seems like such a simple coaching cue, but it's always keeping your head up, always having your head on a swivel. Like no matter what you're doing, if you catch a pass, if you can catch it with your head up, because the game slows down. So if you can see contact coming, then you can make decisions quicker. So that's why it's really important to teach that skill, keeping your head up all the time. And I know it seems like, yeah, well, no shit, but it's not taught a lot, or it's not taught enough, like keeping the head up. So because if you can have the skill of having your head up, the game slows down just a little bit, just enough so that you can make plays, right? So if someone's coming across some kid with testosterone and wants to in his first year of body contact wants to take your head off because now you're allowed to, and you're catching a puck and you're staring down at the puck like that, and then before you look up, a guy hammers you. It's like it's that happens all the time. So if you can teach that skill of having your head up, it's a big thing. And then the body contact thing also is it would be a good thing to learn how to roll off of hits, learn how to stay tight to the boards. You know, a lot of people think the boards are going to hurt you, but it's actually not true. The boards are actually will protect you because you only get hit once if you do get hit. And learning how to roll off of checks and stuff like that, and realizing that, like for me, I remember body contact never bothered me, but I do remember there's the first couple games in the OHL when I was 16. I remember coming down the boards at home. We were doing our home game. We're playing Windsor Spitfires, and I was coming down the boards with speed, and it was a big D, like a big older hairy D, you know. And I'm in my head, slow motion. I just remember, I go, "You're gonna do this or what?" And I did a soft chip and went at it and took a little piece and got through them. I said, okay. And then after you do that a few times, it's like, okay, you can do this. So like when you look across, you can get very intimidated sometimes if you're that guy, but it's a matter of getting engaged and just facing it, right?
Yeah. I think two things about that. One is that's about the point when the violent part of the game starts to happen, that you start to realize like hockey's actually a tough game, and this is where you'll start to figure out whether you actually want to play or not, because if you can't handle that, and some of that is just being prepared for it, right? Like if you get blindsided, like no pun intended, not blindsided by a hit, but blindsided by the fact that I can get hit because nobody prepared you for that, that can make you scared, man, when you're a little kid. Like that can make you scared. Like you get a big boy that already hit puberty. Like we got one kid in here, he's a '09. He's a big boy and he just wants to hammer guys. So if you're on the short end of the development curve in that age and you got this kid coming to crush you and you weren't ready for that, it's like that can give you a little bit of trauma. It could be a little bit of traumatic for you where you're like, I don't want to do that. Like that sucks. you know? So that's one thing, is that prepared piece that you pointed out is important. And then the other thing is, this is around the age, and it continues up through U16, where kids can start to be discouraged because maybe they didn't grow yet, and because you start to get impatient because the draft is so young. Oh, in Ontario for the OHL kids, it's like you have to be ready early for that kind of thing, you know. And like I know there's a kid in here that I've had several conversations with where he's still just small. He's just small, and he's a good player. He's feisty. He's got good bite to him. And I've had some conversations with his mom, and his mom's like, "Oh, I don't know. Like he seems like he's a little bummed out. I'm not sure if he feels like he can still play and like all this kind of stuff." And I'm like, "Dude, you're 15, man. Like you're 16. You have so much space to grow, and you're actually a good player. Like you have a good base to work with." So that'd be the only other thing I would encourage parents to help their kids with, is when they feel like they're behind, or maybe like they thought they were good, but no, I guess nobody else thinks so. That's another line that I've heard from some of these kids. It's like sometimes you just need more time to grow. So if you're willing to be in the fight and you like playing, and the hitting and the contact doesn't scare you, and you just enjoy playing, don't let that gap, because of puberty or because of growth or whatever, be the reason that you're discouraged. You know, you can, if you understand it, it's another thing. You just understand, like, okay, like I'm waiting to grow. Like this sucks. I gotta wait for the growth to happen, because that'll give me a big boost. But be patient until that time, and don't quit early. You know, like don't pack it in early, because that's not a good enough reason. You know, if you give yourself some time, you could end up being a good player. And we're having guys with us, like we just had like Warren Clark's a good example of a guy that undrafted to the OHL. I don't know how big he was in his draft year.
Big boy.
In his draft year, he's a big boy too.
Yep.
Okay, whatever. If he went undrafted to the OHL, plays a junior B year, plays a year in Manitoba, and then he gets a scholarship and drafted to the NHL. Like when he's in his 16-year-old year and doesn't get drafted, he's probably thinking the same thing like a lot of these kids are thinking. Like this is no good. Now, granted, if he's a big boy, then that doesn't, like what I'm saying isn't a direct application of the example, but you get my point. It's just like just wait, man. Just keep working and just hang on. Be patient, you know?
Yeah. Well, and something that's very important, I tell this to all my kids, and the ones that listen, they're safe, is, I told my son from a very young age, very, very, very young age, is head up, because you never know. And I'm talking like even in U10, you never know when someone might take your head off. And that could be a total accident. Like even in warm up, you've seen guys get hit in warm up and they're out. There's a habit that you should create when you're young and all the way through, is always having an awareness that at any point you're protecting yourself. So what I told my son and anybody else is, when you're making a play or don't have a puck, like if you make a pass, for example, boom, never admire it. Like make a play and you have your stiff arms. So if someone does come in, you're there to protect yourself. Now I actually don't care. But if it happens that you take someone's, you come up high on someone and for protecting yourself, it's like, oh, well, at least I didn't get KO'd, I'm not saying skate around the ice, cross-checking guys in the face, but you make a play and you need to be stiff-armed, ready to engage contact at all times and being aware. Very important. Another thing that will actually help a lot of kids, this is probably very, very neglected, is doing neck training. Working on having a strong neck, because it would help you if you do get hit hard from your head snapping. So if you have a weak neck, that's going to, that's how you get concussions, right? So if you can have a really strong neck, that's doing a lot of neck exercises. You can look them up if you want. Do a boxing workout with neck exercise. It's going to really help you prevent some concussions. So I think that's very, very important. But I do remember the first time I really learned about stiff arming, that's where I got the lesson from. It's my first OHL camp when I was 16 years old. And those used to be bloodbaths, by the way, right? I remember tying my skates. We go on the first scrimmage, and there was like 3 guys that walked in before our game. One had his nose smashed. Another guy's full of blood. I'm like, oh my God, what am I getting into? But anyways, we were in our scrimmage, and I went on Craig Duncanson. He was a first-round pick. He just coached the Sudbury Wolves last year, but he was a first-round pick to the NHL. He was a Sudbury Wolves captain, and I was playing against his team, and I went to go finish my hit. I wasn't running him, but I was just finishing my hit, and boom, he had this much stick showing, And when I went to finish, his natural
Gave
reaction
it to
was
you.
to
Yeah.
give you that short cross check across, like in between the shoulder
Oh
pads and the
yeah.
elbow pads.
Tricep.
I'm like, oh,
The worst.
and I did that twice, and I said, okay, well, that's a lesson. Like, it was good to know, like, okay, this is a different league. Like, you don't just get to hit me because I'm going to hurt you first. You're not going to want to do this. You're making yourself miserable to play against, right? So that's another way to. I guess I'm on another tangent here, but like from the physical side of it, it's like it always looks like the guy that's doing the hitting is I don't know, winning the battle, I guess. But doing a little thing like that, making it uncomfortable for people to hit you, guys back off. Some do, and some don't. So if you're a smaller guy and that stick comes across, like just to let them know, like, no, you're not doing that to me without paying a price, then you can create yourself a little bit of room.
That's a great lesson to teach as a coach. It's like make whether you're giving the hit or taking the hit, the other person pays the price for it, man. Nobody gets a free pass when they're around you. That goes like D in front of the net, along the boards, finishing hits, whatever it is. That's a really good lesson. I want to talk a little bit about the distraction piece a little bit. Um, Again, trying to frame it from the coaching perspective. So you got kids are in high school now, and they start to get into like the hockey, the stereotypical lifestyle, backwards hats, flow. They start getting exposed to all the stupid crap that comes with being in high school. Maybe they're messing around at hotels when you guys are on road trips and whatever. So maybe talk a little bit from the coaching perspective, what you can do maybe to mitigate that, how you handle those kind of situations, because it happens all the time where I remember playing with guys that were really good players. We get to high school and all of a sudden they care about their social media interactions with high school girls than playing hockey. And these are the kinds of things that start to infiltrate the team dynamic. So talk a little bit about those things.
Yeah. Well, think I think what's important is that at that age, 13, 14, you're kind of aware of it. Number one. Number two is hopefully you have enough respect with the kids that you can actually talk to them like they're somewhat adults. So this is where I always go back to, like, it's a really interesting couple years because no, everybody thinks, not, I shouldn't say everybody thinks, I hate using that, but like the majority of the kids think that they're going to the NHL or they're going to get drafted, right? So that's what I call the dream, right? So as a coach, if you can always make the dream bigger than anything, then you have a chance of winning the battle. Do you know what I mean? So if you're just telling them what to do all the time, like like what kid wants to hear, stay off your phone because it's a distraction, right? They're like, okay, coach, whatever. But if you explain it in a different way, like, okay, guys, like, or Eric, you say it as a group, say it as an individual, it doesn't really matter. But Eric, here's the thing: you're playing this. What's your goal in this thing? Well, I want to play in the NHL. Okay, what's your goal in the next couple of years? I want to get drafted to the OHL. I want to get a scholarship, whatever it is. Okay, so you got 3-4 years to get this done. All right. So explaining to them like this, and this is what's going to give you your dream. This, and this will take you away from your dream. And it's basically not that simple, but it's like that's what I would focus on the most. The other thing as a team, like you said, like hotels and pissing around and being maybe disrespectful, because that's easy to do, is those are just the things that you always want to do as a coach is teach respect and who you're representing, and you're representing your team and me and your parents, and it's when you're wearing those, at any time really, it's a reflection of what we're doing. So it's teaching them a little bit of accountability and respect for their team and their teammates and their coaches and stuff like that. And when you see something that just gets a little out of hand, you have to nip it right away, like right away. Say it's that's not what we're expecting as a team or as your parents or whatever. And I mean, to me, the dream, the bigger focus will always, not always, but for the majority of people, if you can keep the dream bigger than the distractions or the obstacles, then that gives you a chance to win. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I think one strategy that I've found to be very effective with the young kids, and I don't know if it's as much like this. I think the strategy is effective, but for me, it could also be a function of I'm a little bit younger, so I'm closer in age, so maybe it's a little more relatable. But one thing I found to be effective when kids are pissing around is like don't make them feel like they're in trouble, especially if it's something that's not that big of a deal, right? Like if they did something ridiculous, like they trashed a room at a hotel or something, and like those are things where it's like, okay, now we have to enforce some, lay down the law a little bit. But if one of the example I've used before is if kids are just like running around swearing, just like trash mouth, where it's like it didn't hurt anybody, like nobody's did anything really that wrong. Everybody swears and they just don't really know when to do it and when to not do it yet. Don't default to just like ripping them a new one. Like talk to them about it. Like explain. It's not good enough to just be the dictator. We've talked about that before too. So whenever they're pissing around doing whatever they're doing that they shouldn't be doing, it's like there's a way to communicate the lesson without it being like I'm scared of my coach now because he yelled at me. It's like you want them to trust you that you're going to help them work through it. Like you guys are on the same team. You know what I mean? It's my coach versus me. It's like my coach actually gives a shit about me and wants what's best for me. And you need to relay that message when you're disciplining them. And obviously there's a line, but if it's not anything that's over the line, but it's enough where, like you said, you have to nip it in the butt, then there's a way to do that. And it could be even like we were talking about the bullying thing a few episodes ago, where it's like just a group of the kids are picking on a certain kid, whatever. It's like they're still little kids or young kids. 14 years old is still a young kid. So, you bring them in and be like, listen, I understand. Like I was you before. I get what's going on, but this, and this. This is why this is not good. This is why whatever. And you have to be able to communicate those things if you want to have an effective strategy for dealing with this distraction type stuff. You catch kids like they start to get around vapes too. That's another thing in like grade 9 and 10 now, high school kids. It's like it's one of those things where you want to nip it right away, but you want them to feel like they can come to you and talk. You don't want them to feel like they have to hide. And that's a good thing for parents to know too, actually. It's like you don't want your kids to feel like they have to hide things from you because they're it's you're going to disown them if they're doing something wrong or they're messing around in a way you don't like. So I think that's just an important thing to keep in mind when you are trying to enforce some discipline. It's not just like you bring them the wrath from hell because they stepped over the line or under the line by a hair. You have to be able to figure out the balance for that situation.
Yeah, and it might be hard for some coaches who are just like straight disciplinary military style guys.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's wrong by any means,
Mm-hmm.
because some of those guys can just keep everybody in line. But I think where it falls a little bit short is when they're not around.
Right.
Then it's like having
exactly.
a supply teacher, right?
So that's a better way of saying what I mean. Yeah.
So it's like but having said that, for me, I want the kids to have a lot of fun. But to me, fun is when we're on the ice. It's serious. Serious doesn't mean it's not fun, right? So it's like you're accomplishing something. You're doing something. Like when you walk in the dressing room, the phones aren't your priority now. Like you can learn to put the phone away. Like the phones can go somewhere. I don't want anybody on the phone. Maybe you have to text your dad. I'm gonna be late coming out of the shower and all that. Whatever, that's fine. But it's like the social media videos in the dressing room. There's no need for that stuff, right? So you have that discipline. You have a discipline when it's practice is at 7. If your thing is 6:30, we got to get ready. That means the phones are gone. And if you need to say, hey coach, I gotta text my mom because this or whatever, that's fine. But it's the kind of permission, because I don't think it's a big ask to have your kids get ready for practice, talk about hockey or whatever they talk about. That's fine. It doesn't have to be hockey, but start dialing in to do a good job, right?
Yeah.
For the 2 hours that they're there.
Yeah. So I want to highlight what you said there just before that too, because that's a really, really good point. When I'm talking about an effective strategy for enforcing the discipline stuff, it is my whole point is that it will work when you're not there. That is exactly what I meant. I didn't say that, but that's exactly what I meant. Like, because if you're the discipline guy, it'll work when they're all with you, but when they're not with you, they're gonna piss around. So if you want it to be like you're developing a good person, like that's where it's effective. It's like now when you're not there, they might remember the thing you taught them rather than just saying no, you can't do this and no explanation. Just here it is.
Yeah.
So
for me, when I was a younger kid, that age, this exact age, was Mr. Rose was my coach, and I would never want to do anything to disappoint him.
Yeah.
So
sure.
He had a good way of presenting himself, right?
Yeah. So I mean, we don't need to talk about this too much. Like this is kind of where the off ice stuff and like holistic development concepts start to come into play. So it's like, so you start to touch a little bit about how you're eating, how you're starting to get into training a little bit off ice work and those kinds of things. So obviously those things become relevant here. We don't really need to go into that in too much detail. The other thing I want to talk to you about before we go to the next one is we talk about role players a lot. Role players are knowing your role as a player, and I think this is probably around the age where you start to decide kind of what role best suits your style of play. I would say when you're like on the other side of the, so maybe more the U15, where you're on the other side of the, you're definitely in puberty now, going through it, and you kind of can see what kind of player you're gravitating to or where your skill set really is strong versus weak. So you can start to decide what type of player you think you're going to be. And this, man, this was something that no one ever said ever to me, ever. Who do you play like? No one asked me that once in my whole life, ever. Never, never. So it's like, that would have been a good question to know. It's like, what? And I've given this example in junior when my coach told me that I should play like Scott Hartnell. Like he wants me to play like Scott Hartnell when I'm like 19. And that was actually the first time anyone ever said anything about comparing myself to another player. I had never thought of that. And no one ever told it to me. And it seems stupid. Like, how did I not think of that on my own? But like, I was a kid. So I'm 19 and he goes, Scott Hartnell. I'm like, Scott Hartnell?
Yeah, and you want to be Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
and because that's what everyone says.
Yeah.
That's what everyone does.
Right.
And it had somebody started to teach me that when I was younger. It's like, what are you actually good at? Like, what is your skill set? No one really told me that. Like, I knew things that I was good at. Like, I had pretty good hands. I could skate pretty well. I was maybe a little bit above average size. But nobody was like, hey, this guy that plays in the NHL, watch him. But it was like, watch Crosby. It was like, watch whoever the top guy was at the time. And it's like, yeah, but like, I'm not that. So it would have been helpful to know a little bit about roles. And I think this is the kind of the age where that starts to be appropriate to start teaching that as a coach and helping the kids to understand a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think part of understanding why, see, you got to be a little bit careful with that though, because you don't want to pigeonhole someone into being a defensive defenseman because you think that's what they are. You still want them to be able to play hockey. But I think the first things first is that if you can teach the idea of a team rather than an individual, that's a good starting block, right? So as you're talking to your team, it's like, okay, we win as a team, and teaching the team concept that everybody has something to contribute, whether it's you are the Sidney Crosby at the time where you're doing everything and you're the most important guy in the league, or you're the 6th D or the 4th D on your team where it's not so relevant, and teaching that some guys, like, this is where when people emphasize goals, that's where it gets confusing, right? So that's why emphasizing the defensive side and the little things that people do become valuable. So nobody really wants to be like, if you were to talk to a 14-year-old kid and say you're going to have a role like give me a name here. Let's say a forward that is in the NHL that is like a 4th line guy, right? That gets the ice and
Clutterbuck.
There you go. Well, no, I think some kids might embrace that a bit because he's known for his hitting. I'm looking at more a subtle forward, like Michael Bunting, maybe? Is that one? Okay, like he's a good player though, but like he's not Sidney Crosby. He's not the top name. So you go, well,
yeah, Killorn would be that kind of guy.
Okay, let's say Alex Killorn. He's a great player, by the way. But if you say play like him, kids are probably not going to get too excited about that. But if you say, okay, on the Stanley, like in the last 5 years, the Tampa Bay, I was going to say Buccaneers, wrong sport. The Tampa Bay Lightning have gone to the finals 5 times or 4 times, and they're in the mix for the last 5-7 years. They won 2 Stanley Cups in a row, and you've got your Steven Stamkos, and you got your Kucherov. Those are the guys that are getting you goals. You got Victor Hedman, and you got Sergachev. Those are the guys that are your point guys. But if you start teaching them, like, they win because as you move down the lineup, Nick Paul, another one, right? These guys are what contribute to team success, and they're making lots of money. And then and pointing out like how they win, and you point out their little habits, and then so that they understand that, oh, okay, not just getting the goal is the most important thing. Being a really good penalty killer is important. Being a really good shutdown guy, like when you're on the ice, no one scores on you, and giving them that responsibility. Because I don't want to say you're a power forward, because that's like, that could be even confusing. Hey, who's the best power forward? They say Tom Wilson. Okay, I'm going to run everybody. Well, that might be good, but you also might be missing the point, right? So it's so that's how I would approach it is like you have your team, you have your thing, and then as you settle in as a coach, you know who your best players and why, and how you slot them. And now it's up to you to make sure that you know that they know why they're important and how they're important. So even though minutes might be less than this guy, and we're talking minor hockey, it shouldn't be that much less, but you might not get the power play. But we say we want to win as a team, and explain how important this is, and then I really see you moving forward as a doing this and moving forward and getting school paid for, or getting a chance to be a pro, or whatever it is, playing junior hockey, whatever it is. And a lot of guys don't do that, but like if you can specialize in this, you have a better chance, because this like you have a better chance of playing at a high level if you can play two ways instead of just scoring goals, because goal scorers they don't leave, right? No one's looking to replace Ovechkin. But it is, but it's critical. Like if you're not a goal scorer, for example, if you're not a goal scorer and you're not putting goals in every game or almost at will, then that means you're probably not a goal scorer. So
Right.
how can I be an effective player if I'm not scoring goals?
Yeah, so I was gonna touch on kind of you mentioned right before you went on the spiel there about you got to be careful because you don't want to pigeonhole a kid, like stick them to one thing. So maybe I don't know if you'd agree with this or not, but maybe one way you can do this where you're kind of starting to get them to understand a role, but you're also giving them the freedom to still play. One thing that I remember it was actually Billy that was when he coached is he would never get mad at guys for trying to make a play and failing unless they did it like at a bad time or in a bad spot or like if you're the last man back and you try to inside out a guy, like not the best time to try to make a play there. But if you're going, you go down on a 3-on-2 and you try to 2-on-1 a D and you put it in his skates instead of getting it through to the guy, it's like I'm not mad at you. Like you're trying to make a play and you didn't. Like it is what it is. And I think that's kind of a philosophy you can have as a coach, where even if you have a guy that maybe he doesn't have the hands, let's say, but he goes to a D and he tries to make a 1-on-1 move and then he fails and it's a turnover. It's like don't be mad at him, right? If it's a bad situation where he shouldn't have done that because of the time of the game or the area of the ice, then we point that out.
Teach the
Yeah.
situation.
But if he's coming out of the corner and he tries to beat a guy 1-on-1 and he turns it over, it's like, okay, like you tried to do something and you didn't. But I wouldn't say, hey, like you're a power forward, that's not how you play. You should be driving the net when they're 14 or 15, right? It's like that's something where if you're a pro and your role is power forward, then it's like you're not trying to do that. Like get to the net, man. But when you're younger, I think that's one way as a philosophy as a coach where you can start to get them to understand the role, but give them the freedom to still play, because maybe they'll turn out to be a guy that can make more plays than you thought, or whatever, because you can peg a guy especially if they're like the power forward's the easy one because it's obvious. Like if you have a big kid that's like a little bit raw, it would be easy to say, hey, like power forward, there you go, right? But look at a guy like Keenan Suthers is one of your guys who's like 6'8" or whatever, and everyone talks about how skilled he is. Now he could probably use playing like a little bit more of a power forward, but at the same time, it's like he's very, very skilled as a big, tall guy. So you don't want to necessarily stick him to one thing like you were saying. So I think that might be a good way to do that with players. So if we jump to U16 now, we can kind of maybe finish up. We'll touch on the junior age a little bit, but maybe finishing up on the U16s. Same thing, like all the stuff we talked about before when we were talking about the focus and the systems and all that stuff. Everything levels up once again. But again, the differences I think would be now you have the draft this year, agents and people wanting agents and people thinking they need the exposure starts to come into play a little bit more at this age.
Yeah, you got just instead of saying draft, you've got like because we talk about our U.S. or European viewers, it's like it starts going to the junior levels or above.
Right.
So junior college.
Guys fighting for ice time. Coaches start to shorten the bench a little bit more. Focus being much more on winning as opposed to fun. So maybe talk a little bit about that level. And I think particularly for in Ontario or even for the U.S. guys, like things start to get more serious because of the draft or because now you're getting a little more college exposure or whatever. So people start to get a little crazy about that or getting an agent and these kinds of things that haven't really been present at the younger levels quite yet.
Yeah, I think I'll frame it this way is that I think when you're 15, 16 years old, That's the age where some kids are getting more attention. I don't want to say in the draft list or college. It's whatever area of the world. If you're in Sweden, it could be getting to the Frölunda junior system, whatever, right? So at the early age, you can be looking and someone is getting more attention than you, because that could be a distraction. It could be the OHL draft. It could be an agent. It could be someone giving all kinds of love, and you're sitting there on the outside looking in, saying like, "Well, why not me?" So, as a coach, it's really important to prepare those kids both ways, right? Because this is where it gets really. This is like, it's an age where people can get bitter, they can get jealous, they can get upset, either good or bad, like enough to fuel them to make themselves work out harder or whatever. Could be upset that they don't want to play as hard anymore. They think of quitting. So that's where you have to understand that your path could be different than someone else's. So just because you're a 16-year-old kid and agents are talking to you and you look like you're going to be a big time player, doesn't mean that without the hard work and without all the little principles that you teach as a coach and learning how to play the game, that could change everything, right? So that's why it's really important that as a coach you teach the fundamentals of hard work, the little details of the game the best that you can, and being humble and not let those little touches where an agent or a team is talking to you swell your head so much to think that you're actually that good. Because now at this age, you're learning that now it's the game of hockey, and you have to actually learn how to be a pro. Like if you're going to move up the ranks, right? So, and then the kids that aren't getting the love, it's like stick to it and learn how to be a player, because you got a lot of years still, even though it seems like other people are getting a lot of love. So from a coaching standpoint, it's like teaching that, and this is where your individual coaching comes in, and giving people the right feedback at the right time, right?
Yeah. Maybe talk, kind of leading off of that, is talk a little bit about, because at U16, like everyone's still paying,
Mm-hmm.
right? So maybe talk a little bit about how to balance ice time with kids and things like shortening the bench, and then maybe we can touch a little bit more on developing guys to be team players. We touched on a little bit with the U14, U15s, but like how it's more about the team than about you per se.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe talk a little bit about those two things. So first, balancing ice time, shortening the bench.
Yeah.
How to
Okay.
think
So
about that.
so with that, here's the thing. In my opinion, with youth hockey, it's you can only shorten the bench so much, because most teams have 3 lines 6D, right? So D's kind of rotate no matter what. 3 lines. I mean, if you're shortening down to 2 lines, you're just wearing out your team anyway. So that's not good for anybody. So uh, so I think a lot of times when people complain about ice time, it's like we might be talking a minute or two, right? Now, if there's a ton of power plays and stuff like that, I understand. But at this point of the process, we are trying to win, right? Like if anyone's playing minor midget and we just want to roll the lines and everything's fair, that's or equal. That's not the best strategy to have. So I think at that point, the kids have to have a good understanding that there are the roles are, this is our power play guys and why. This is our penalty kill guys and why. And this is, if we pull the goalie, this guy's going to get more ice. I mean, it is what it is. But I don't think it could be that dramatic at that age, because you still only have 3 lines. You're going to get your guys out there. You should, anyways, right? And then what was that? What was the next part on that? Was
Teaching like the team stuff, like developing team players, not just your individual success is the most important.
Yeah. Well, this is the hardest part. So this is where there's a fine line of, you don't want to say to someone that your dad doesn't know anything about anything, because maybe you don't either. But this is where it's like, if you have a hockey background, like, so here's a really good example. I've used this before, but I had one of my players when I coached in Detroit. His dad, we were very good friends and stuff, and he was he was about 6'3.5" in Bantam, big boy. He went to Harvard, and his dad asked me, he goes like, "Can I ask you as a friend?" Or no, he said, I forget if he asked me as a friend or as a coach. He goes, "Can I just ask you why you don't put Nick on the power play anymore?" So I said, "Yeah, it's really simple. I hope you understand. Good friend of mine. So I said, listen, when I have put him on there, he bobbles the puck. He gets the puck at the blue line, he bobbles the puck. And he looks very, very uncomfortable there. And I said, so you want your son to have success at hockey? He wants to have success at hockey. He wants to go to school. Ended up going to Harvard. I said, so if I put him in that situation 4 times in a game on a power play, where he's really a shutdown D with some offensive, well, not really offensive side, but he can skate the puck up, get some good shots on the net. But like in minor hockey, he could look like he's both. But when he gets on the power play, he bobbles the puck and it looks like panic. So if I continue to put him in that situation, how does that look for someone scouting him? Right? I'm putting him in a place where he's not shining. So can we work on that stuff? Yes, but I have other guys that they're comfortable in that situation. When the puck comes to them on the blue line with pressure, they can handle it and they just make safe plays. Where Nick's bobbling and he looks uncomfortable. It's not a good place for him.
So can I interrupt for a second? So important thing to highlight of what you said, because a lot of parents would maybe listen to what you just said and say, well, if you would let him, like if you would work on it with him, and like you said it in passing, just like, yeah, we can work on those things, but you have a whole other team of guys. That's a really important thing to highlight. It's not just about this one player. So it's like, this is a spot where he's not strong. So instead of me continuing to put him there, I have guys where they are strong there. And this is where you need to understand as mom and dad or whoever, the team dynamic. It's not just about, it's not my job as the coach to only worry about your kid. It's like I have other kids also that I need to worry about. So yes, it would be nice if I could just keep him in that position all year and work on that power play ability with him. That would be great. But I have 5 other defensemen.
Yeah, or I got a forward that could go back there, no problem.
Right?
We could
so it's not just
plays.
about you. Sorry, I just want to
No, that's great. So yeah, it's really important. So that and I think in youth hockey, I know there's a big thing with especially that draft age or getting to college that where don't talk to me because I'm the coach, you're the parent. But I don't think that's right. I think to a certain degree, because I think if you can communicate effectively, and not saying the parents are going to agree with you or going to be happy with it, but if you can communicate your philosophy or highlight what they're good at or what they're struggling with, I think it helps. But I think a kid needs a clear understanding. So I that's what I said to him and Nick. I said I want to put you in situations where, because you're at the point where you're getting looked at, I want to put you in situations where you shine, not you're getting exposed.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then vice versa, not vice versa. I had another really offensive player, and the dad was like, "Well, how come he never gets on the power play or the PK?" Because he doesn't care about his own end at all. But he can score goals because he can, if he, with his speed and stuff. I said, but I'm not trying to score goals on my power play or my penalty kill.
Yeah.
I mean, we can, but if we do it right,
on
the right times. But you like to go this way where we have to take care of this first. So, and that was a star player, and that dad was like, "Oh, this is ridiculous!" Like, because my kids can score goals at anything, whatever. But I think it's important that my point is the important thing is that you explain and teach and let them know you're not a bad player because you're not on the power play. So let's just say everybody wants points. Everyone wants power play. Everybody wants the most ice. Yeah. If you explain it properly to them and honestly with them and show examples of, again, what's your dream? I want to play college. I want to play in the OHL. Okay, so you've got 7 goals this year. We're at game 40. You're, without being an asshole, you're not a pure goal scorer. So for you to think that you're going to go to Michigan with 7 goals and be on the power play, that's not going to happen. So what would you rather get to Michigan and play there, or go to the OHL and play there and give yourself a chance by playing a 2-way game and doing things that are going to get you there? Or do you want to go in a place where you're going to fail? Because this player is that type of player and you're this type of player. It's not to pigeonhole, but it's to give them, well,
at this age, it's now the reality. It's not, we're not talking about a 12-year-old now, right? We're talking about a 15, 16-year-old kid that next year there will be a decision made about their play based on how they are playing right now. So it's like, if we want to talk about developing other parts of your game, that's great. But at the end of the day, the people judging you are judging you on how you play right now. So if you think you're an offensive player when you're not, then you're not going to be taken as an offensive player, if at all. So let's start putting ourselves in a position of strength rather than pretending we could be or should be in a different position than we actually are. So there's a difference between pigeonholing and then we're just being realistic about where you're at right now. and maybe later you develop other parts of your game, and that's fine. But
well, this is where video with the kids at that age is really important, right? Because, and I'm not talking hours of video, but this is like how I used to do my video with my teams is I would just take, a lot of people have clips of I want to show this, this, and this, and that's fine. But how I used to like to do it is I used to just take maybe from the start of the game and just go and we're going to take 20 minutes of doing video. Kids loved it, and I would just here's a face off, bang. What's your role in the face-off? Well, I'm supposed to squeeze. The centerman. I always have to act as if it's a 50-50 puck. All these little things, and we just say, "Did you do it? Did you do it? Did you do it?" So as the game would go on, I would see like maybe someone back check and just get a stick on a puck and disrupt a play, and I would stop and I'd say like that, guys, that right there. It's not a highlight, but to me, it's a highlight, and to your teammates, it should be a highlight because you just take a scoring chance and the puck's going the other way. So that's the things that's going to make you win hockey games. Those are the things that are going to make you have success at the next level. Not just burying goals. Burying goals is good, by the way.
Yeah.
But so when you start highlighting or rewarding or whatever, praising those little things, then it's a lot easier to say, okay, I want to do that now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think when you start getting to that age, that's now where all that stuff it starts to be. Now you're turning it into work more now, right? Like if you're seriously thinking about this as a career path, that's where these things start to come into play, that U16, and now you start to jump up into the junior level where it actually is work, more or less. You should be treating it like a full-time job, more or less. I want to talk about that junior age just briefly. As a coach, the first thing I want to say for the players is just that is that if I had a conversation with a kid yesterday, calling me they were missing the workout yesterday, and they've missed like 3 times in the last 2 weeks because they have a job now. They got a job, which is fine. There's no issue with you having a job, but for these 2 kids that they work together for like their summer job thing, it's like, okay, so is the most important thing right now that you make a couple bucks, or is the most important thing that you're optimizing your hockey development? So these 2 guys are 18, right? They're going into their 3rd year of junior. So it's like you guys both say you have aspirations for hockey. So can you afford to not only miss workouts, but be taking resources away from your hockey development because you want to work for 8 hours a day? It's like, is that what you want? Which it can be, if that's what you want. Like that's 100% fine. But if you're saying that that's not what you want to be doing, then why am I getting phone calls that you're missing a workout again this week? So my point of saying that is just now that's that 17 to 20-year-old age. It's fair for the coach to have expectations about the players, especially if you're coaching like super high level junior, right? You got a junior A or OHL or college team or any precursor to those leagues. It's fair for you to have expectations on your players now, where it's like, you guys are all here because you say you have aspirations for hockey. Because on most junior teams, you're going to have, let's say 90% of the kids that are saying, I want to get to the next level. Like I want to move up in hockey now when you're playing that high level junior or whatever. So I think as a coach now, you can start to have a little more expectation as opposed to we're in a teaching mode all the time. So I know coaches say this all the time. Like when you get to a certain level, if you're 17 years old playing on a junior A team, it's just expected that you do certain things or that you know certain things. And if I have to spend my time as a coach correcting you, it's not about that anymore. So like to a certain degree, I think it's fair for coaches to put some or most of the responsibility on the player to figure out what they need to work on. Obviously, you're going to help them to figure it out, but they need to figure out, own, and take the initiative to do those things to work on what they need to work on because it is more of a job. So maybe talk a little bit about the mindset from the coaching perspective on the junior age and kind of expectations on players, etc.
From the junior age, this is just the fact. This is different type of hockey now, because now it's yes, there's always unless you're in the NHL, and even in the NHL, there's still a developmental piece. You still want to develop players, but that's not your main focus anymore. Why? Because if I'm coaching at a junior level, it's number one about winning. And why? Why is it about winning? Because it's a job now. And it might be a part-time job where you're making $15,000 a year, or 30, or 70, or $120,000 a year, or $250,000 a year. So the most important thing, and it's also about as a coach, it's about my development, because if you're coaching for 30,000, you want to make 60, and if you're making 60, you want to get to the next level, blah 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 blah. So now the coach, um, that's the demands, is that you're coaching to win. So now it's a whole different thing. Now, does that mean you neglect teaching? Absolutely not, because if you're a good coach, you're going to be able to teach, and it's your full time job, or almost a full time job. This is what you're choosing to do. Now, that's your philosophy can change and should change, but it shouldn't change the fact that you're teaching, like trying to get the best out of it. Well, I shouldn't say that, because it depends again on your philosophy. If it's about winning and winning only, then if you're not performing, then next guy, right? Do I think it's the right way? No, but I think there's you're going to have a better program if you're teaching and explaining, and not babying, but teaching and explaining. Like, so for example, if you got someone that is a 16-year-old kid on your team, or a 17-year-old kid that's just a bubble player or fourth line guy, you to me, it's important to have conversations with them to let them know that they're improving, what to improve on. Like, there's nothing worse than going to a coach, like a young kid, when they think that they should get more ice time. They're maybe intimidated by the coach. They try to ask a coach a question, and they say, "Yeah, just do this," and it's just bullshit. It's just words. That's the worst thing you can get out of your player. But if you actually take that player and look at him from maybe a 16-year-old year, and you're going to have him for 2-3 years, and see him for what he could be, and that's what you're doing with your prospects. You're seeing what they could be and truly develop them. Then you're doing them a big favor, right? Like, you're building your program. And now at that point, like at the junior level, you are teaching. Like, when you are teaching, it's about wins, losses, and doing it the right way. So, did that answer the question at all?
It did. One thing I'm going to kind of point out with that is, because I was talking about it's fair to have expectations as a coach and all this, but one from the coaching side, and I feel like from the player side, you should go into it with that attitude, like, I need to figure my shit out because it's not my coach's job to baby me, kind of thing. But from the coaching side, you need to keep in mind, even at the junior level, especially with first year kids coming in, a lot of them don't have good coaching in minor hockey, right? So it's important to keep that awareness, where if your expectations are so high that you're kind of out of touch with the reality of where these kids came from, then that's not going to be effective either for your program. And to your point, some coaches do that anyways. It's just like, if you're not good enough, see you later, I'll bring in the next kid, which that can happen. But they are still kids.
Like, I don't think it's the best for your program.
Right.
Long term.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying too. So it's like, especially U20, they are still kids. So don't forget that they're still kids. Even though at junior they act like they're adults, and they think they're adults, and they think they know everything and all this kind of stuff. But a lot of them don't know. And a lot of them come from centers where they didn't have great coaches, especially in if we're talking about south of Toronto in Ontario,
or north,
right? Or north, yeah, really,
or outside, east or west,
outside the hub of Toronto, yeah. Basically.
Yeah,
it's like the expectation would not be that they have really high quality coaching coming out of minor hockey, right? So your expectations, to a degree, need to be capped, because they can't have had that great of teaching, and you need to know that when you're in that coaching role at that age. Because I remember I didn't know anything going into junior. Like, I did not know anything about how to play the game properly, none. So, and I had skill as a player, but that's not knowing how to play hockey, right? So it's important that you know that as a coach, and that's the best way to get buy-in, right? And that's kind of, you talked about what Mike Babcock was talking about, how he's learned, because now he's coaching, and where to get hired? Columbus. So,
well, like the thing is, like, so the coaches that are doing junior, I mean, I gotta say, for most of the coaches that I know and have been around, they're doing a much better job of understanding. I think it's just the way it is. Like, if you try to just be a hard ass, like old school, it typically it works for a short period of time, but kids these days, I think people in general want to know why they're doing something, because if you understand why you're doing something, if there's good reasoning, or if I do this, this, and this, I might have a chance to do this. Like, if you give someone tasks and they accomplish it and they're good enough to play, then I think kids respond a lot better than that. It's like, I mean, it's not ridiculous to think that you don't have to, but that it would be better to explain something to a player than not. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think it's
yeah,
just
for sure.
obvious to me.
Yeah.
But just now, just as for the players and the parents, it's like it's the funniest thing, not the funniest thing, but it's really interesting. No matter how much you warn or tell, like I tell parents and players that when you get to junior, it's different hockey. Like sometimes people don't care because they're making a living, and people don't understand how much of a business it is, even though it might be a small business. They don't understand that people are actually making money now, and it's about wins and losses, and your feelings and your ice time. It doesn't matter anymore, and the impatience, and that's something a coach needs to be good at too, is showing them examples of, this kid here was you 5 years ago. Look at him now. Look, this kid was here was you three last year. Look at him now by doing this, this, and this. It's just pretty simple stuff.
Yeah. I think to close up, because it's been over 2 hours. Um, that kind of tails perfectly into kind of what I wanted to finish on, which is kind of how you set up your team structure right off the hop. And I think this is the same from U10 to U20 all the way through, because even at junior levels, like obviously you can give more, like you're more communicating directly with your players now as opposed to mom and dad, but they're still kids. And it's good to have that communication channel with parents all the way through. And so maybe just finishing up on that, like I think it's really important that from day one, if you're the coach, you communicate all these kinds of things that we've been talking about this whole episode with the parents and with the players. So that's your whatever your philosophy is, and then how you think the team is going to work, how you think it's going to function, getting input from parents and players. And that doesn't mean you have to listen to them or they run the team, but making them feel like that it is a team and everyone's in it together, as opposed to I'm the coach and you guys are here only because I said you can be. Um, and then even up to the junior level, because I know like you talk about parents in the OHL, like they're calling the coach, like they're still doing this kind of stuff,
Some do,
and it's
or their agent does every
yeah,
5 minutes.
and it's because to a large extent it is because they are still kids, you know. It's because if you're 18 and 19 years old, like you're still a kid, man. You're not 100% there yet on being able to handle everything in life on your own. Some kids that are exceptional cases are, but for the most part, you're still a kid. So I think it's important, just as a closing thing, that as a coach, you keep that communication channel open with parents, and you're transparent about what's going on as much as you can be, obviously, because you're fighting a losing battle as the coach, no matter what you do. So the more you communicate what's going on, the easier it's going to be for you as a coach to handle whatever the situation is, that regardless of what the level is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like I want to eliminate junior and up for now.
Yeah.
I think it's really important that you communicate to the parents because they're paying. That's
Yeah.
the bottom
Yeah. Yeah.
line.
Yeah. True.
It's just the
Yeah.
bottom line, man. Like
Yeah.
like
Well, a lot of junior they're paying too now, though.
a lot of
So
junior they are too. Like
yeah.
in Canada at least. I don't know what it's like in the States or
Yeah.
whatever, but like in a lot of the junior, yeah, you're right. So I think as long as parents are foot in the bill, I think they have to have a clue. And that's why I think it's important. Like I was never a big meeting guy with parents, but I gave a couple rules. You got to be here at this time. Wasn't crazy. I understand that you guys have whatever something going on. So if you I'm not going to make you come an hour before practice if the practice is at 5 or whatever. Let's get the reason why I want you ready at this time. So there's eliminates a whole bunch of other stuff. As long as you're ready for my practice 5 or 10 minutes before, so I can go over something if I have to, then that's what I want and get dialed in. So that was one rule. Another one, we would talk about dress codes and stuff like that. Like there's nothing worse than saying after 3 games, like, do we wear tracksuits or suits? Right. So like I would say to my team, what do you guys want to do? Suits or tracksuits. Now, if I was a guy that I want them in suits, I never understood that. But if I want them wearing suits to a hockey game, then you have to get that out clearly. And if you want them in tracksuits, whatever. So that's that. It's if you let them know that it's an open door policy to talk to me, or it's a closed door. I don't want to talk to you. Like whatever it is, be very clear about it. I want a winning team, or I want a developmental team, and be very clear about it. And then, is it a 24-hour rule to talk to me, or is it come and talk to me anytime you want? Like whatever that is. But if it's clear, it's clear. Or if it's clear, it's better. But I do believe that parents need to be informed of at least some communication, and even I would even go as far as, and geez, why wouldn't you? If I'm talking to you, Eric, as a player, and I have a little meeting with you before practice or after practice, or we talked about something, it's not a bad idea to say, hey, Bob, Me and Eric had a quick meeting today, talked about his defensive play. I really want him to hone in on this, this, and this, just letting you know. So so one of the messages aren't mixed, or communicated with your kid. So if he comes back and you guys are pouting about ice time, now you know why. Like, it's always good to know that, right? And then the other thing is, like, I think it's like a lot of people don't know, like a lot of parents don't really actually understand hockey, right? So when you watch your kid play and you go, well, he should be on the power play, or why this, like, I think it's important to have that open door policy where they can come and talk to you about, so you're clear, like, he didn't play because of this, or he getting this extra ice because of this. Like, I rewarded him because he did this, this, and this right. He's good in the dressing room. Like, all those things are important because parents don't necessarily know the game.
That's definitely true.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we should stop because we did covered a lot of shit there. Okay. So we did with the last year's, I'm going to have that, that question thing for members that are on the site where you guys can ask questions about this stuff, because we could keep going in detail about so many of these topics. So if you have a specific question, fire it in on that, hit that button when you guys log in on your login page, and you can get us a question. We'll do a Q&A thing after this one as well, because I know there's a lot of information we're going to cover here. So hopefully that was helpful. I think that was good. You got anything else you want to finish on?
Good.
All good? Okay, sweet. Let's see you guys next week.